Welcome to Crime Most French, a fortnightly podcast covering intriguing cases carried out on French soil. Researched and narrated by Cedric and rudely interrupted by me, Melanie. We're the true crime podcast All the Alliance. Crack open le vin and let the mayhem commence.
This is episode 68, The Treasure of Abbot Sauniere. At the end of the 19th century, a small village priest becomes famous for spending large amounts of money he can't possibly own. To this day, mystery surrounds the origin of his fortune. It's a previous episode about another priest that reminded me of this one, which is a very, very famous story.
Okay, so we're doing a couple of monks. Not really monks, couple of priests.
Yeah. In the 1880s, Abbot Sauniere, abbot of Rennes-le-Château, on the Mediterranean coast near the Pyrenees in France, wants to start renovation work on his church. A 1983 report from the department, remember after the last episode, at the time the church and state weren't separate yet?
Oh, yes.
The report describes the church as having a split tower on all sides and in need a complete re-roofing.
That sounds expensive.
It does. Until now, the commune, so the town, was financing emergency work to keep the church up, but really they weren't doing any more than that. So it was just about standing.
So it was the bare minimum.
Yeah. But apparently that request from 1883 was ignored. So here we are. We have a pissed off abbot, I guess. For revenge, he advises the villagers to vote for royalist parties in the 1885 presidential elections. And remember, 1885 is only a few years after the end of the Second Empire, Napoleon III.
Yeah.
So the Third Republic is very, very young at that point. It's probably about 10 years old. So the mayor, of course, reports it and complains about the priest's behavior to the state services. And they decide to suspend his pay for 6 months. Because remember, they were paid as...
by the government.
By the government, yeah. They were essentially public servants.
Yeah.
The church, always doing what it wants and not what it should do, and ignoring the rules, appoints the abbot teacher in some random religious school, where he never went and never had any intention to go to, so they can pay him in the meantime.
Right, okay.
So he's still paid for those 6 months where he's not supposed to be.
So this fictitious role that he doesn't fulfill.
Oh yeah, he's suddenly a teacher, but doesn't teach, really. But he still gets paid. In 1886, with the help of a barrel maker from a nearby village called Abbot, it's a very strange name, who was competent as a stoneworker as well. So he was a barrel maker. So he was a
cooper as well as a mason?
Yeah. He starts working on a church. And he also works on the presbytery, which is next door. Mm-hmm. The financing comes from a few villagers and some of his acquaintances in other places he knows. And eventually that work allows him to live in the presbytery. Because before that, the presbytery wasn't really a place you could live in.
Okay.
Once the roof is redone and all the leaks repaired, Sauniere continues with the work. So now he's going beyond the emergency work. His next job is to replace the high altar. Mm-hmm. And I've seen photos, it was pretty nasty. The new one was made by a company in Toulouse and financed by a donation from a woman who didn't live in the village and had never been to the village, but paid the invoice directly to the company.
So it seems to be that he's now coming into kind of like wealthy benefactors paying for stuff.
Yes. And nobody knows who that... Well, we know the name of that woman, but we don't know why she decided to give him money.
Okay.
It's a very strange thing. So anyway, the new altar is made and paid for. It is during that renovation that workers, as they move a large stone that was part of the base of the old altar, as far as I remember, described as a Visigothic style stone. So apparently the Visigoths had a very specific style of carving stones.
So these are the Germans basically coming through and marauding through...
Yeah, Germanic tribes that invaded most of Europe
Mm-hmm.
in like between 300 and 800 or so.
Weren't they quite instrumental in taking the Romans down?
Yeah. Oh, they plundered Rome a couple of times, and
Mm.
yes, they took over the Roman Empire, essentially.
A quick thumbnail sketch of who the Goths were.
The name of our village is a Visigoth name as well.
Ah, right, okay.
They were fairly well implanted here and in Spain, especially.
Ah, right, okay. We have a very old church.
It's only 12th century, so it's long after that.
Mm-hmm, yes. Yeah, yes, in terms of that, in
Yes.
terms of the Goths, but in terms of churches, it's quite an old church.
Yeah, it's one of it's Roman style, because Gothic never got here.
No, I mean, it's all
Ironically.
Romanesque churches in this part of the country.
Yes. So Gothic never got to the Goth
Nope.
territory. Well, Visigoth, really. They were different tribes. But anyway, in that big stone in Visigoth style,
Mm-hmm.
they discover a set of scrolls. It's not clear what exactly was found and where, because we only have second-hand accounts for that. Apparently, the Visigoths had a habit of carving small holes in important stones to hide important things.
Right.
Like they would have relics and important documents hidden in a small, like tube-shaped thing in stones. So apparently it was well known and fairly common that they did that.
Yeah, it's a bit like these 18th and 19th century kind of like bureaus that are full of little hidden drawers and
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it means that it's not likely that there were many scrolls, because of course it would have been a small space.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What we do know is that these scrolls exist because the mayor
Mm-hmm.
demanded to see them when he heard about those scrolls being found, because technically speaking they're owned by the village, they're not owned by the church.
Yeah.
Apparently Sauniere provided copies of them, but it's not entirely clear if the copies were the copies of what was found in the church or copies of other things.
Right.
Because he never showed the originals.
There seems to be some kind of chicanery going on.
Yes, that is very, very fishy. So already something is not right.
Mm.
We don't have these copies anymore because they were destroyed in a fire in the Mairie in 1910 as well. So we don't even know what they could have looked like.
This is beginning to feel a bit LDS.
Little bit.
And the golden tablets that was given to...
Yes.
What's his name? Not
Smith?
John? Isn't it John Smith?
John Smith, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are descriptions of these scrolls in 4 different documents.
Uh-huh.
And we have those documents. One is apparently... One of the scrolls was apparently a genealogy of Dagobert II and his descendants from 681 to 1244.
Wow.
And that document was apparently dated 14th of March 1244. And it had the seal of Bianca de Castilla, which was the daughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine's granddaughter.
All right,
so
okay.
great-granddaughters of Eleanor of Aquitaine.
I'm surprised these things are readable, because kind of like churches are very damp and dank places.
If it was well sealed in stone and properly covered, it would have been pretty much the same condition as on the first day. So it's not entirely surprising that that document survived. There was apparently also a last will and testament from François-Pierre d'Hautpoul, dated 6th of November 1644, and it contains, among other things, a genealogy of Merovingian kings from 1200 to 1644, so essentially the next step.
Mm.
There was apparently also a last will and testament of Henri d'Hautpoul, dated 6th of April 1695, so a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of dates where the documents were put in there. And also a copy of an Old Testament canon dating 1753, so it's not that old, supposedly written by a previous abbot of Rennes-le-Château, containing on one side, the side being called the Great Scroll, randomly placed words, and on the other side, the Minor Scroll, truncated lines one above the other with letters apparently strategically put next to each other to form other words and stuff. So essentially some kind of weird cryptic thing.
Is that like acrostic?
Kind of, yeah, or like crosswords or
Yeah.
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the 4 scrolls are supposed to be.
But it sounds like you need a cipher.
Yeah, well, the last one clearly is,
Yeah.
yes. For the story, the Merovingian kings were the first French kings.
Mm-hmm.
Charlemagne was a Merovingian,
Okay.
one of the last ones, because he started before that, I think. And they were allegedly descendants from Jesus.
All right, okay. So this is very much a genealogy hole that they've discovered.
Yeah, that's what allegedly was in those scrolls.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least the ones that were presented to the Mary by the priest.
Okay.
It's at that time that Sauniere decided to appoint a young 18-year-old woman, Marie de Narnaud, as his servant. It makes a lot of noise in the village for a few reasons, but one of them is canonical law requires that person, so a priest's servant, Mrs. Doyle or
Yes.
Mrs. McCarthy,
Mrs. McCarthy,
to be at least 40 years old.
Yeah.
She's
you
not
don't
allowed
want
to be 18.
Yeah, you don't want to be tempted. Sounds a bit like what's his name, Gandhi, and sleeping
Yes.
with young 18-year-old and younger girls just so he can not
Yes.
fall into temptation.
Exactly. So, of course, the rumors start going around, and people say that she's not just a servant. She's more than that. But there's no proof of that.
How's the kids, Len?
Yes. So after the first discoveries, the scrolls,
Mm-hmm.
Sauniere continues renovation work. And his next step is to replace the stained glass windows and rebuild the whole church floor.
This is now sounding less like, a wealthy patronage. I mean, that's expensive.
Yeah, definitively. A lot of it is done by him, by Abbot, by a few people who work for free for him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there would have to be some kind of money coming in from somewhere.
Oh, big pockets.
Yeah. So anyway, as part of renovation of the floor, he makes more discoveries in 1891. One of the tiles in the nave he discovers is in fact a sculpted slab called the Knight's Slab. It hadn't been noticed before because it was upside down, so the sculpted side was ground facing.
They put the grout on the wrong side.
The stone was turned so that it wouldn't be noticed, really. That's what happened. So one side of the stone is carved,
Yeah.
and it shows a knight and what was it? It shows a number of things. I think I have it a bit later. But that face was facing the ground, so it was only the flat face
Right.
that was seen from above, from when
Yes.
where you walked.
Okay.
So it just looked like another tile.
Mm-hmm. But if you looked at it from another angle.
No, you had to lift it and turn it to see anything.
So it was like they'd put the grout on the wrong side. They
Yeah.
actually eventually...
But it was on purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, it was obviously designed
secret
to
squirrel,
hide whatever
yes.
that picture was.
Mm-hmm.
So it discovers that, of course, when they take the floor out. Yeah, so it was part of a larger structure at some point. And that specific stone shows a knight or a woman riding Amazon style. It's not clear.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a number of reproductions. I think that stone is now housed in the museum that is now on site. The horse is drinking from a trough.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another panel with a horse rider with a javelin and a round shield. And could have a child's head. Of course, we're talking stones that are many, many hundreds of years old, have been in humidity and all that. So some of the pictures are not that clear. No,
yes.
It's clearly, it has lived. And yeah, it's not easy to necessarily see what it shows.
But it certainly seems to be a church that's full of relics.
Yeah, because that stone, according to archaeological studies, was dated 771.
Wow.
So it's a very, very old stone that was there long before the church.
Mm.
There is a record in parish documents that the location of the stone contains the remains of the local lords.
Right.
The family has now disappeared by that point.
Mm-hmm.
And as it was tradition of the time, they would be buried in the nave and
Yes.
all that. So that's what they think that stone was.
Okay.
There's a skull that is found on the slab as well, with a hole in it.
Oh, that's never good.
Yeah, it was examined in the 2000s, and it was determined that it belonged to a 50-year-old man dead between 1281 and 1396, but nobody knows who he was. Most likely one of the local lords, but who knows?
Yeah.
There's no explanation.
There's an accident with a...
But but that's way after the stone was made, anyway.
Yes.
We're talking 700
700
years, 600 or
years,
700 years
yeah.
after the stone, so...
Nothing to do with it then.
A hypothesis says that it's possible that the slab was inverted to hide its function during the French Revolution.
Right.
Because at the time, a bit like under Cromwell, the state tried to...
plunder and smash the monasteries.
Yeah, because before the Revolution, the French system had 4 estates, technically speaking. One was the lords, one was the religion, one was the representatives of the people who had no power,
right,
and one was the people. During the Revolution, he kind of got rid of the religious one, got rid of the people, and left only the lord and the people representatives. So one possibility is that stone was hidden during the Revolution so that it wouldn't be taken away by who knows who.
Okay.
But it's difficult to know. It is known that the priest at the time of the Revolution, I think it was called Abbot Bigu, hid a number of things so that they wouldn't be found.
Oh, right, okay.
Some people talk about a treasure, but at the time the village was a very small village, very poor. Even at the time of the story, it was still a very poor village. All the houses were crumbling and stuff. So there's no reason why there would be a treasure around there.
Yeah.
But people say that maybe he hid documents, maybe he hid, I don't know, bones, maybe he hid relics, who knows.
Not necessarily have high monetary value at the time.
Yes.
But
just a value to religion.
Yeah.
So people say that would have been possibly part of that. So he turned the stone and nobody would know that it's there. So anyway, the renovation work on the church ends in 1892.
Right.
As the work on the church is over, Sauniere remains interested in what lies under his church, especially under the presbytery and the cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
It's likely that the discoveries he's made during the church work kind of made him think that it was only a tiny, tiny part of something much bigger, because it made no sense. It made no sense that a tiny church would have very valuable, in terms of history, documents buried in there. So it must be that it's part of something bigger.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that a small church would have kind of like royal lineage.
Yes. So during his searches, and he's helped by his servant, Marie.
Oh, she's young and strong, presumably. She's only 18.
He does a few things that surprise the villager. For example, he digs up and moves graves, which is a big no-no for the church.
I was waiting to say, hang on a minute, isn't that kind of like sacrilegious, isn't it?
No, you're not allowed to do that, but he did.
Oh dear.
He's also reported as having destroyed writings on some of the stones.
So he's editing.
He's kind of editing. One of them was apparently the grave of Marie de Negridable, which was the wife of François d'Hautpoul, mentioned before, whose last will and testament was apparently one of the scrolls. He was the last lord of Rennes-le-Château. So it's very strange that he would have somehow wiped her headstone.
Yeah, that's very bizarre.
Yeah, of course, to make it even more suspicious, he was doing it at night.
Oh, God.
The municipal council gets really, really pissed off at that point, and they write to the préfet, so the representative of the state in the department, and they report Sauniere's activities. And it's also during that period that the villagers report that they have seen Sauniere dig up holes in the countryside around the village as well. They say that he disappears more regularly than before, often for several days, without anyone where he goes. He's said to have been traveling with a donkey with him that would carry heavy bags. Nobody has any clue what he was doing, but apparently he was seen digging holes.
This is very suspicious.
Oh, it is totally suspicious.
He doesn't seem to be tending to his parishioners an awful lot. He seems to be entirely focused on skullduggery in the church.
Yeah. So from 1892, Sauniere starts an unofficial phase of the changes to the church and presbytery.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, he doesn't tell what he's doing to people. So it's no longer, oh, I'm renovating the roof, I'm renovating the floor. It's just, he's doing stuff. Nobody knows what.
It's just every time they go in, something's changed.
Yes.
Oh, I don't remember that gold font.
Exactly. So the difference is now he's spending a lot of money. So before...
And there is gold fonts.
Yes. So before he was really fixing the church, now he's adding to the church. These changes are also a bit special. They're really at his taste, which is not the church-sanctioned style. So, for example, he has paintings made in bright colors. Churches in France don't have bright colors.
Oh,
everything's white, everything's beige, there's no bright colors. His paintings are like Orthodox church paintings. Gold everywhere, lots of colors, really flashy.
So basically he probably would love Donald Trump's taste.
That is the equivalent for the church of Donald Trump's taste. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he does.
I'll tell you, he probably has a gold toilet.
Yes. He also has many statues made, and including one that was probably the most controversial, which is a devil carrying the stoop.
What's that?
It's the bowl that contains holy water that you sign yourself with when you get into the church.
Oh, yes, I see. The bowl of water that you do.
Yes. Normally it's just on the pillar.
Yes.
But in this case, it's a devil that carries it.
Well, it's kind of sending out mixed messages, isn't it?
It does, but apparently he got away with it because the devil appears to struggle carrying the holy water.
Of it. Uh-huh.
So his argument was he's really struggling carrying the holy stuff, and therefore it shows that the devil is inferior, and that's how he got away with it.
Oh my God.
But that's really pushing the boat at that point.
I'll tell you, this wouldn't happen nowadays. The Vatican would squash that pretty quick.
Yeah. All that lasts until 1897, and at that date the church work apparently stops.
Right. Run out of money.
He's not done yet. He buys 6 pieces of land around the church, put them in the name of his servant, not to his name. He also declares her his sole inheritor, and between 1897 and 1906, he has loads of things built. He has a massive house built, the largest in the village. He has a mini zoo installed with apparently monkeys and llamas and exotic birds.
No hippos.
No hippos, no, he's not a drug lord. He has a massive greenhouse, which still exists, built. 2 towers, one of glass, one of stone, with a rampart in between.
Holy crap, where's all this money coming from?
Well, nobody knows, that's the thing. That's part of the mystery.
Yeah.
Where is that money coming from? He doesn't have money, he's supposed to be poor, he's a priest.
Yeah.
The village is poor, so it can't come from the people who come to the church. It certainly doesn't come from the church, because the church keeps their money. So nobody knows where all that money comes from, but that would have costs. It's been estimated to be something like 6 to 10 million euros today.
Wow.
Nobody knows where that money comes from, and that's really where the mystery starts, because what he's done before, he could explain by the fact that he had help from locals and he had a few donations, and it wasn't that expensive to redo the roof because, well, the work was free, it was just material. Now he's starting to spend a lot of money, and nobody knows where that money could possibly come from.
Well, not unless his benefactor, someone like, what's her name, Bettencourt.
Yes, but no.
No. Yes, but no. She died recently, didn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
She did, yeah. Allegedly, to try to get the church off his back, the house he built was supposed to receive retired priests. So poor retired priests.
A home for retired hairy priests.
Yes. But, according to rumor, there are no retired priests in the house, and he often has banquets, giant banquets, in that house for rich and expensive and powerful people. One historian, for example, got his hands on invoices for one of those banquets. Apparently he says that the the amounts that were spent were frightening. And it was so much money spent on one banquet. One example he gave is he imported 50 liters of rum directly from Martinique for that. So he paid for 50 liters of rum to come from Martinique to the southeast of France just for that banquet.
This totally reminds me of the guy who was running Renault and Nissan. The guy who basically had to smuggle himself out of Japan.
Yes.
He, for his 50th birthday, I actually think he hired out Versailles. And just... He floated it as some kind of corporate event, but it was purely for his 50th birthday. And he went totally over the top like that as well. God, he is just a kind of like a Victorian scammer.
Yes. So a banquet would have been, I don't know, a Lamborghini or something every time. And he did apparently that on a very regular basis. So if you add that to the cost of building the house, building all the towers and greenhouses and stuff, he spent millions and millions.
He basically is behaving like his surname is Bourbon. I mean, it's just unreal.
Yeah. The church gets wind of it, obviously, because that's not going to be discreet. And they accuse him of trafficking mass. Mass trafficking is something that used to happen. It doesn't really happen anymore because nobody cares. But you could sell a mass to someone, so a Sunday mass or a daily mass, because priests were allowed to do 3 masses a day for money.
So this is getting the church to pray for your kind of like your soul.
Could be anything. You could pay for a mass for your health. It could be
good crop or...
Yeah, it could be anything. It costs a lot of money, so obviously you wouldn't do it for a crop, but you could do it for lots of other things. Like you have cancer and you're rich, you pay for a mass and maybe you're going to feel better because
so basically, while you're having a word with the big man upstairs, can you ask for this kind of thing?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So that used to happen quite often, but the church really tried to stop it because it's dodgy and also
immoral.
Priests were not...
Doesn't work.
That's not supposed to make money.
Yeah.
So it was technically at that point illegal in the Catholic Church to do so. But it's really no different from televangelists on US TV and stuff.
There's no difference.
Send us money and we'll pray for you, same thing.
Exactly.
So there's no difference. The problem was, really, that a priest could do 3 prayers a day.
Right.
If you sell more than that, then you're selling something you don't do. So at that point, it's fraud. During the 10 years of the start of the 20th century, Sauniere continues to spend like a drunk wag. For example, he buys a valuable stamp collection for himself.
Okay.
He buys outfits and jewelry for Marie. And he receives warning from the church that ostentatious spending has to stop. He ignores it. When the church demands to know where the money comes from, because really they really have to explain it, he says that it comes from generous anonymous donations. Convenient. However, a new bishop is appointed at that time, because the old one died. And this one was a bit more interested in knowing exactly what's happening under his responsibilities.
Yeah, this is my garden. What exactly are you doing in it?
And he gets his hands on the parish's account books.
That'd be interesting reading.
And he discovers they're very dodgy. So he decides that he can't let Sauniere continue because most likely he's doing some illegal stuff and there's now kind of proof that something is happening that shouldn't. He accuses him of simony, which is buying and selling religious items or functions. So you could sell a priest position to someone, or you could sell relics, or you could sell a statue from a church. That's called simony, and that's totally illegal, both in the church and in law.
And I can hear Indiana Jones saying this belongs in a museum.
Yeah, exactly. But because Sauniere refuses to stop, he decides to move him to a different parish. So he's no longer officially the priest of Rennes-le-Château. Sauniere just refuses to go, and he stays in his house.
Right, okay. In that case, he certainly sounds a lot like Trump.
Yeah. So it goes further in the church, and he essentially goes to trial in the church, and he's sentenced in 1910.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, he's officially removed of all his functions in the church. He's not excommunicated, but that's the step just before being excommunicated. It's essentially the last warning before you're kicked out of the church.
So basically, you can be a giant thief in the church, but they still won't excommunicate you.
Well, they can excommunicate you, but it's very extreme, because if you're excommunicated, you don't go to heaven and all that. So you have to really be bad to be excommunicated. But he's really the step before.
To be honest with you, I mean, just given the lavish and just the orders of magnitude by how much he spent, I don't think he should be going to his afterlife.
Yeah. So the church appoints a new priest, obviously, because he's no longer officially the priest for the village. He appeals to Rome in 1913, and he's reinstated. I don't know how that's possible and how that works.
He has some pictures of the Pope doing something very
But
dubious.
yes, it could be linked to the massive banquets. At that point, the bishop must have been seriously pissed off.
Oh, I'll bet. Going over his head.
Yeah, so the bishop goes at it again, and he manages to have him forbidden to give mass in 1915.
Right.
At that point, he's no longer a priest again. He continues to give mass anyway in his greenhouse. So he turns his massive greenhouse into
a church.
A chapel.
Right.
And he gives mass in that greenhouse.
Doesn't that need to be kind of like sacred space?
Well, he's a priest, he can make it if he wants to.
Oh, okay.
So the majority of the practicing villagers come to his
and so
illegal
the
church.
Big, huge, lavish, newly blinged up church is empty, but so, they're all in his
greenhouse.
In his greenhouse.
So they come to his illegal masses.
Mm-hmm.
They, as far as they can see, obviously, is Sauniere is a benefactor for the village. So not only he nearly rebuilt the church, so the church that was crumbling is now in good condition and very nice.
Yeah.
But also he spent money on the village. He spent money on the villagers that were in need. So if you could justify that you needed money for whatever, he would give it to you as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the villagers see him as a good guy who's doing stuff for them, so they just follow him.
Kind of crazy.
Yes. During World War I, he is accused of spying by some villagers. Well, hostile to him, because not every villager is following him. He's also accused of grave robbing, trafficking mass, and links to royalist groups and plots, because there were plots at the time in the early 20th century from royalist groups to put the monarchy back in power, because it wasn't that long ago before, since it was there, so they want it back.
Mm-hmm.
The rumors are helped by the fact that Sauniere has close link to his brother, Alfred. And Alfred is also a bishop, is also an abbot in a nearby village.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, Alfred has managed to create links with the local aristocracy and stonemasons, and he even becomes their official priest and semi-official spokesperson.
Mm-hmm.
So, because of those links between the two brothers, the actions of Alfred are kind of used as proof that Béranger is dodgy as well.
It runs in the family.
Yes. They also say that Alfred sends money to Béranger as well. So part of his money might have come from the Masons and the aristocracy via his brother.
Right.
Possibly.
No
proof.
He may have had legitimate benefactors at one point, but that seems to have spiraled.
Yeah. Alfred is also drowning in controversies, so that's one of them. Another one is that he moved in with a much younger woman in 1903, which you're not supposed to do when you're a priest. And he dies in 1905, having lost everything and having a posthumous child.
Of course.
His kid was born after he was dead. So, Len.
Yes. How's the kids? How's the family, Len?
In 1915, two abbots, reportedly close to Sauniere, die.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing special about that
at
that point. But they were rumored to be involved in Sauniere's schemes and to know how his money was made. In fact, one of them was murdered, and his killer is said to have been looking for very specific documents because his presbytery was searched and all that.
Right.
So one of them was killed, and it looks very much like somebody was expecting to find something very valuable in his house.
Mm.
Because he was close to Sauniere, that kind of added to the
Weight.
story
Yeah.
that priest, that abbot, who was a priest, would have known something.
Yeah.
And therefore there was something.
Yeah.
That's kind of circular logic, but that's what people think. After the start of World War I, Sauniere's life becomes a lot more difficult because, first of all, he's no longer a priest.
Mm-hmm.
He's no longer allowed to do mass. He can't receive money from donations in the name of the church,
Mm-hmm.
so he's no longer allowed to be given money. And he also can't act in the name of the church, so he can't do anything to the church. He can't do anything for the village in the name of the church.
Okay.
And because of the war, there's a lot less money floating around. So even if he had wealthy benefactors, most likely these people would have kept their money instead of giving it to a priest.
Definitely.
So at that point, it looks like the money runs out. In 1917, he has a heart attack as he's walking on the ramparts between the towers, daily walk.
Mm-hmm.
Before he dies, another priest comes to confess him, because that's what you do. Confess a priest before he dies.
Mm-hmm.
And amazingly, and that's pretty much unheard of, his confessor comes out of his bedroom where he's lying after his heart attack,
And spills beans?
totally looking shaken,
Right.
and he refuses to absolve him
Wow.
and goes.
Wow.
So nobody knows what they talked about, nobody knows what Sauniere told him, but that priest just says, no.
Wow.
I'm gone. This guy doesn't get absolved.
Okay, he's done some bad shit.
Oh, yeah. The rumor has it that he comes back 2 days later and does absolve Sauniere.
No, he's probably
Unofficially.
he's probably a pressure put on him.
Or maybe his bad conscience, because he thought, well, if he's not absolved, he's not going to heaven, he's going to go to hell and whatever. So maybe he decided to come back anyway. But he does it unofficially.
Okay.
So not in public, not it's not recorded, it's not official. He might have done it 2 days later.
Yeah.
So something has happened there.
Mm-hmm.
As Marie, his servant, is his sole inheritor, she receives the domain.
Right.
She receives the houses. She receives his fortune, but also his debts, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
His family, Sauniere's family, declined to receive anything from him. So essentially they were told, oh, he's dead, you can inherit from him. And they said, fuck that, we don't want any of this.
Wow.
They probably heard of the stories. They don't want to be involved. They
don't
want nothing to do with him.
Dirty church money.
Exactly. So they totally refuse to be involved in this inheritance.
Right.
So Marie inherits everything. Because in France, you can't bypass the law. The law is your descendants that get whatever you have. Or if you don't have descendants, you are ascendants.
Yes.
And if you don't have ascendants, then in like concentric circles of your family. So you can't say, oh, it's my neighbor that gets all my money. You can't do that. So, but because his only family said, nope, don't want that, then they fall back on his will, and his will is to give everything to Marie.
Mm-hmm.
She's quickly isolated in the village because nobody wants to talk to her because she's dodgy, obviously.
She's got dirty church money on her hands.
Yep. And she lives on her own for many, many years. She has no known income. Nobody knows what she lives on, but presumably she has access to a treasure. Until 1946. In 1946, she designates a local family, not from the village, but from the area, as her sole inheritor.
Right.
And they move in with her. It's the Corbu family, who apparently visited the domain in 1945. So they move in. Under the condition, they explained to journalists later that the deal was they would treat her as the grandmother of the family.
Yes.
And in exchange, they would inherit everything from her. And she would tell her where the treasure came from. That was the deal.
The goose.
And she says, yes, I will tell you where the money came from, where the treasure is and all that, on my deathbed.
Right. Which
happens in 1953.
No, they don't have to wait too long.
But she falls ill. The father of the Corby family goes to her and says, okay, well, you're going to die, you should tell us now. And she says, I'm not dead yet, come back in a couple of days. And she died. So they have no idea, they weren't given any information.
Yeah, cunning old lady.
Yeah, so having the domain and having no access to the treasure, they try to monetize the story. Because it's well known at that point in the 50s.
Yeah.
So they open a hotel restaurant in the house. And they convinced journalists in France and strangely in the UK, and some dodgy historians as well, to publish stories about the priests, based on no evidence whatsoever, of course, so that they kind of make the story appear in the press and kind of makes a noise, and people come and visit, because that's the way they're going to make their money, given that they don't have that treasure.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. When you have a big house, you have to it takes a lot of money to upkeep.
Yes.
And even a house the size that we live in is a giant pain in the ass. It costs a lot of money.
Yes. So this is essentially the end of that part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where would the money come from? People have tried to guess what could be the source of all that money. So the first obvious one is he actually found a treasure. And there are many candidates for it. The first one is a treasure that could come from the pillaging of the Apollo temple in Delft by the Celts in 279 BC, which is a known fact. The treasure has never been found.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very fragile idea because there's no historical document accounting for the whereabouts of the treasure. So why would it have ended up in the southeast of France?
It's a bit weird.
It's very random, so people don't think that's the case. There's also another one, which is the Visigoth treasure, because we know the Visigoths plundered Rome and lots of big Roman cities.
Mm-hmm.
They made they made lots of money out of it. We don't know exactly where it went. The biggest, of course, was the pillaging of Rome in 410 by Alaric I, Visigoth king. That's the most popular story, because that was a lot of money.
Mm.
It's not that far into the past, so we're not talking 200 BC. It's 410, so it's closer. And bits of that treasure were found in Spain not that long ago.
Right, okay.
So we know for a fact it exists. We know for a fact it was kept by the Visigoths.
And it spread that east.
And it went all the way to Spain.
Westward to...
Yes.
Yeah.
So people think that must be what he found.
Yeah. There's
also the treasure of Bianca de Castilla, who, after the 1251 crusade, during her son's Louis IX's reign, so Louis IX was in France.
Yeah.
It's Saint Louis in France.
Oh, okay.
He came back with the treasure, would have given it to his mom to keep in Spain, and it was linked to a number of scrolls that were found, and maybe that's what he found.
Mm-hmm.
He found a way to get to that treasure. Maybe it's southeast of France. That's the story that's most favored by the Corby family, the owners of the domain now.
Right.
There's also, and that's the one people remember, the Templars treasure.
Of course.
Because when the order was dismantled by Philip IV in France, most likely there was a massive treasure somewhere, because the Templars, the reason why the Templars were dismantled is not because they actually did anything wrong, it's because they became an inconvenience. The Order of the Templars was created so that when the knights went to a crusade, it was extremely expensive. They needed money on location.
Yes.
So what they did was essentially the Templars were the Western Union system of the crusade times. So you would give money to the Templars where you live.
Yeah, and they would take
they would give money to you on Holy Land or whatever at the other end.
Right.
So there would be a money transfer, which didn't exist, obviously, because there was no movement of money, but they had money everywhere, and that's how they worked. And they financed whole kingdoms. So the Kingdom of France, the Kingdom of Germany, a number of them were actually bankrolled by the Templar, who were loaning money to those kingdoms.
Yeah, no wonder they were disbanded.
Exactly. At some point, those kingdoms decided not to pay their debts because that was becoming way too much. It was easy to take the Templars' money, not that easy to pay them back. So it was easier to just dismantle the order, say they were heretics, convince the church to go along with that, probably get money out of that, and get their treasure, and not pay your debt. So the treasure of the Templars, and it's known that they had a lot of money, not personally because they were themselves poor, but the order had a lot of money.
They were handling a lot of money.
That was never found.
Yeah, okay, okay.
So the story that people remember is
the Templar.
Sauniere might have found some of that treasure.
Yeah.
Because the territory of the Templars was in roughly that area of France.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember my godmother's husband talking about tunnels, because we are also in the Templars area, and apparently locals regularly find human-dug tunnels underground that were used to go around unnoticed by the Templars, allegedly. Most likely they're just caves, but anyway. So there are lots of rumors like that. So there's a lot of people remember those stories and remember Sauniere's story, and they think, okay, they're clearly linked.
Yeah.
There's no proof of that, of course, because no treasure has ever been found. That's actually the starting point of the Mrs. Davies series.
Oh, yes.
The Treasure of the Templars. Anyway, so that's another story. There's also the Cathars treasure, again, religious order and all that. When their last castle was taken was Montségur in 1244, so kind of roughly the date of one of the scrolls. Apparently 4 of the knights escaped with the treasure, which was never found again, and it wasn't far from that area, so they're saying, okay, well, that could be that treasure then, if it's not the Templars.
Yeah.
Again, it's just pure speculation. There's nothing to go with it. And also,
there definitely seems to be a running theme throughout all of these.
Well, the thing is,
he's definitely found.
He's found something, and he must have mentioned treasure either to lead people into the unknown, and so that they just get off his back, or because that was a convenient explanation. You don't have to explain what the treasure is. You don't need to know where it comes from.
It's just a treasure. Yes.
So if people ask for why you have so much money, and they can see you have money, you say, well, I found a treasure. I don't know where it comes from. It doesn't matter to me. I found a treasure. So that's probably what he said, and people ran with it and tried to find which one it was.
Yeah.
The last one is the Abbot Bagu's treasure, again, that we talked about during the Revolution. He's known to have hidden things.
Yes.
Most likely no value whatsoever, no money, no gold, no nothing, just documents, possibly, maybe relics and this kind of stuff. So that's not likely to be of any value. But that's not really the most likely explanation. If you go with Occam's razor, the most likely explanation is mass trafficking. But on industrial scale.
Yeah, I mean, but it was a tiny church, though. I mean,
it was a tiny church, but he's known now to have published ads in many magazines, weekly magazines, religious ones and non-religious ones.
Right.
In France, I think there was one found in Germany, possibly even in the US. So he published ads all over the place selling masses. So send me money and I will have a mass for you.
And a small amount of money.
Yeah.
Even if you're asking for a small amount of money each time, if you reach a large audience, still parlays into a fortune.
Yes.
Right, fair enough.
There's a very good reason for why that's the most likely explanation. One, first, even treasures found in graves, which is what people think he did.
Yeah.
Can't be that much money.
No.
How much treasure can you hide in a grave?
No.
Even if it's pure gold, it's not going to be a massive amount of stuff.
No.
So it can't possibly have found money or gold or valuable stuff in large enough quantities to justify the millions and millions he spent.
No.
So that makes the treasure not even logically possible.
Even if it was like Westminster Abbey he was plundering, there still wouldn't be millions and millions.
Yeah. Another thing is, after he died, Marie seems to have lived in poverty. But that makes no sense if she has access to the treasure again.
Yeah.
why would she be poor? Why would she have to sell her house in 1946 to an unknown family if she had access to a treasure? If she was going, also these people are just naive, if she had access to that treasure and she was going to tell them on her deathbed, why was she so poor that she had to sell her house to them? That makes no sense. There's obviously no treasure.
No. And and because the she's just a priest's,
servant,
servant. She can't offer the same services.
Yeah. But she was supposed to have found the treasure with him, because remember, she was with him when he was digging the graves and doing stuff around the cemetery and stuff. So she would have known, and allegedly she knew everything about him, and she was more than his servant. So if she, as soon as he died, became poor and couldn't pay for things, because also what is not very well known is her family moved in with her for a while, and they were paying her bills for her. Okay. She was paying for nothing. Mm-hmm. For a person who has access to the treasure, it makes no sense. So it looks like the source of money died with him. Mm. If that's the case, the most likely explanation is something he was doing couldn't be transferred to another person. And mass trafficking is the one thing. That's the obvious thing. There are rumors of mail he was receiving at the post office by mandate, so money sent by mandate to the post office. So you go to the post office, you receive a mandate, and they give you money for that mandate. Yeah. Some people say that he was receiving between 150 and 400 a day.
Yowzers.
So he would have sold up to 400 masses a day, and he can do 3. So if you count a small amount of money, that 5 francs at the time, it would have been over 20 years, maybe 500, 600,000 gold francs at the time, and that's millions and millions of euros today. That makes perfect sense, and the scale works. Yeah. But he just managed to turn an illegal activity in the church, which priests were doing to have pocket money, into an industrial activity. So instead of selling 3 masses a day, which is very dodgy, but he was selling 400 a day. And of course, we're not doing it because it's not possible. It's not technically possible, but pocketing the money. So I don't understand why people think there is a mystery there, because it is so obvious how he's done it, and it would have been easy to do. That's the thing. It doesn't involve anything supernatural. It doesn't involve and not even a clever scheme. It's just turning something that is well known into a higher scale activity. To me, that's obvious. And really what proves it to me is how Marie was poor after he died. So instantly, as he died, the money stopped. So it can only be something he was doing as he was alive. So it wasn't a treasure. It wasn't even donations. It was clearly something that he was doing himself.
But because the church, when it was being renovated, had a couple of minor things found, then
exactly. That people connected dots that didn't
exactly the way that people do.
So the last possible explanation as well, which is not instead of the mass trafficking, but could be on top of mass trafficking, is financing from royalist groups via his brother. People think that might have happened, and most likely it did. Because
to a smaller scale, possibly.
Yes, because they could act on local populations to make them support royalist groups and try to further the cause and vote for them and blah, blah, blah. So it's likely he got some money that way, but most likely not a huge amount. Compared to trafficking mass, it was actually pocket money.
He was just good at it. He was
extremely good. Apparently, he was extremely good at selling anything. If he hadn't been a priest, he would have been a salesperson going door to door and making a fortune selling hoovers or whatever. Apparently, he was extremely good in convincing people to give him money. So that's essentially the story of Abbot Sauniere.
The first TV evangelist.
Not TV, but first magazine evangelist, I guess. Yes. The first guy who turned it into the massive industry that it is in the US today.
And the moral of our story today that you don't know about is perhaps sometimes it's safer to keep your scripts in a church rather than Google Drive, because it seems to be easier to access.